There is that old story of the Roman emperors when they stage triumphs in Rome after they'd won a battle or won a war. There would be a slave who would stand in the chariot with the conquering general or emperor who would whisper in his ear just a reminder that you are mortal, that you are not God. Donald Trump has exactly the opposite, right? He has somebody in his ear constantly telling him, you are the greatest, you are the king, you are the emperor, you are bigger even than Jesus. Wow, what could possibly go wrong? I think we're kind of seeing that, aren't we?
I mean, she prints out positive thoughts for him all day long, and then so he can read it, hear it, feel it, breathe it. She's an emotional support animal. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Welcome back to the Tara Palmeri Show, and happy 4th of July. I have my friend Charlie Sykes on the show for a rollicking conversation about Trump's inner circle, including a staffer who acts as a human printer and an emotional support animal. We also talk about his pay-for-play pardons, how he plans to fight back after the Supreme Court shot him down on birthright citizenship, and the pitfalls of access journalism, why so many reporters get trapped by it, and why both of us chose a different path. Speaking of editorial independence, I also wanted to let you know I've published a new edition of the Red Letter explaining why I recently refused pressure from both a Republican and a Democrat, including Stacey Abrams' team, to change my editorial decisions. You can find out all about it by scanning the QR code on this screen or by clicking the link below. And if you believe journalism should answer to readers, to the audience, not political parties, I hope you'll consider becoming a paid subscriber and supporting me in my mission. Now, here's my conversation with Charlie Sykes.
Well, I don't really know where to start here with all of the things that are going on. I mean, it is the cascading corruption, which I kind of feel we've been numbed about. I mean, I think that Donald Trump does have one insight, which is that if you're going to steal money, go big, that you're not going to pay a bigger political price for stealing trillions of dollars than millions of dollars because most people are kind of bad at math. But these stories are really kind of incredible. I mean, the Kazakhstan deal, the no-bid contracts for the White House ballroom, the fact that he has been, pulling in billions of dollars, trading off the president. I mean, really, and we haven't even gotten to the Epstein files, have we?
No, and it's incredible. Like, this has been probably one of the most corrupt moments in history.
Yes.
I can't think of a more corrupt moment going maybe back to the Gilded Age, which obviously the president ironically always references, the time when great, robber barons were basically abusing our immigrants that had just moved here to the U.S. looking for promise, and instead were living in poverty in horrible working conditions. But yeah, I mean, this is a moment in time in which grift is just the game in Washington, and patronage is everything, even from the reflecting pool, which is apparently filled with algae. Although my producer Abby Baker went down there to the mall and said it looks a little better now, so all that hydrogen peroxide must be working. But he gave the contract to a friend of his who gave $300,000 to his supporting super PAC, and I think the contract was for more than $10 million. It's a guy he's known his entire life. Yeah. And it's just, there were no other options. There were no other bidders. He just got the contract flat out. And that is not the way the system is supposed to work. As president of the United States, you're not supposed to be able to enrich yourself secretly through crypto. I mean, that's the craziest part about all of this. It's an entire, industry that is completely deregulated, and it's a way for him to make money from shadowy figures, who many of whom could be foreign nationals for all we know. I mean, the fact that he's willing to take money from foreign nationals, planes, etc., it's just... And
he's flying them.
Normally, you would have to file as a foreign agent for taking this kind of payment. If you were not Donald Trump and you were taking these kind of sums of money from foreigners and you were involved in public policy, I believe you'd probably have to file as a foreign agent. Wouldn't you think?
Well, you would think. And, you mentioned, one of the earlier, big bribes, which was when Qatar gave him the $400 million winged bribe of the new Air Force One, which probably cost taxpayers about $1 billion. He's so proud. He wants to show that off. So you're probably going to be seeing images of Donald Trump flying around in that. And of course, he's going to take that with him when he leaves, right? I mean, some of the details.
After it's been retrofitted with our money, right? And
with our money.
And it was supposed to be cheaper to just make a new plane rather than having to debug that plane. I wonder if they actually did a decent job of debugging it, or did he give the contract to a friend of his?
Okay. By the way, you keep talking about the friend of his, and this is one of those little details about the reflecting pond, the reflecting pool that's turned into this green swamp fiasco. This is the guy he gave the no bid contract to. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Let's just show a picture of this guy. This is not a parody. This is actually real.
He does kind of like a mob boss, I will say.
Yes,
he looks a little bit like a mob boss. Being a girl from Jersey, I can say that.
But even if you were a producer of a movie on this and you came up with that character, somebody's like, that's a little bit over the top. Do you have to be? Can we be a little bit more subtle? So let's go back to your point about him being a foreign agent, because one of the things we found out is that Trump is making tens of millions of dollars in his cash grab from foreign countries, building resorts, hotels, other deals with countries who are negotiating with him on tariffs, military aid, and other major issues. So, for example, a property in the United Arab Emirates generated $10.4 million for the Trump business last year. One in Saudi Arabia, being built by a real estate developer close to the ruling family, sent the president's company $9 million. And one in Bucharest, Romania, and another in Qatar sent him $5 million each. It is truly remarkable what's going on. Although, let's put it in some context. The sale of the pardons, I used to say this is the one where, on Earth 2.0, in any rational country, if you had a report that it was an open secret that basically you could buy yourself a get-out-of-jail-free card for $2 million, that would be one of the biggest scandals ever, wouldn't it? I mean, wouldn't that be just dominating the news?
It is,
Pardons
and it
for
would.
sale. Yeah.
Now, first of all, we know that in the case of Ghislaine Maxwell, it was debated by the deputy attorney general whether they would pardon her in exchange for just clearing the president. So that's a for free pardon commutation, right? In exchange for clearing him in a conversation in terms of his connections to Jeffrey Epstein. And then the problem is that before Biden left the White House, he did pre-pardon so many people in a flurry during Trump's inauguration. I guess you could understand why he would be worried that they would continue to go after his son, Hunter. But at the same time, the precedent wasn't great, right? Then Trump went on to pardon all these Jan 6 guys. It was just a mess. Pardons are... everybody gets one. I'm convinced that there will be a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell, and it will come on the same day as Diddy. Yeah, I do. I think there'll be a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell, and I think Diddy, and I think George Santos, and I think it'll be like a whole slew of them. And the moral quandary will be so blurred, and they know that the media will not know which way to go. Will they glom onto Glenn or will they glom onto Diddy, right? And it'll just be this.
It'll be hundreds.
That's what they do. Overwhelm the system. Just pardon so many people all at once. Maybe they'll pardon people who are dead. It's just like that's how they do things, right? And I've been reading Regime Change, Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan's book, and you see this coming up over and over again. The idea of, okay, this went wrong. Let's do something now just to overwhelm the system so that people don't focus too much on what happened on this latest scandal. And that's why, like you said, if you are going to steal money and be corrupt and go big, because it's just you'll overwhelm the system with the gravity of it all.
Well, your point on the pardons, I think, is exactly right. And, the fact that they're talking about 250 pardons for the 250th birthday, I mean, that's kind of his bullshit obsession with numbers. But I heard Jonathan Swan the other day essentially saying, look, nobody in this administration cares about illegality. They feel that they are absolutely above the law. Donald Trump has been immunized by the Supreme Court. He has the sweeping pardon power. He's told insiders that he is planning to pardon everyone who is within 250 feet of the Oval Office. So people ought to brace themselves. And I'm sorry to go back to the Biden precedent because, it's going to be a lot of whataboutism. I think there are going to be hundreds of, if not thousands of pardons when and if he leaves office. Anybody who could possibly be held accountable for the corruption, the brutality, the war crimes, everybody is going to get it. And of course, on Fox News, it's going to be, well, Biden, set the precedent for all of that. And this is just the world that we live in, isn't it?
Well, in a way, it goes back to his political messaging, especially after he was indicted, right? And the number of impeachments he's been through. He has long said to his supporters, I am the shield between you and them, yes. Right? Like they're coming for you, but I'm right in between exactly you. And right. That's why yes. I have been indicted X amount of times and prosecuted, but they're just coming after me. But once I'm gone, you're next. So it works for him, right?
It's a very powerful message for him, yes.
It is a very powerful message. Now, everybody who's around Trump better hope he makes it to the end of this whole rigmarole, or, they may not get that pardon. He is an 80-year-old man at this point, and there's a lot of pressure to being president. He's taken some long gaps where we don't know exactly where he was. They're better off asking for the pardon now, right? Or at least making sure that they're on J.D. Vance's good side.
Well, I mean, you mentioned J.D. Vance. He gave that interview, and we got a lot of blowback when he said, if we was talking about Richard Nixon, we appreciate Richard Nixon more all the time because if Watergate was a story today, it would be like a 12-hour story. It was ridiculous that brought down a president. And in a way, he was right about it because he's basically announcing that we have figured out in the Trump administration that we can break any law, or commit any crime with absolute and complete impunity. All right, I want to get to the Supreme Court in a moment, but the grift, I think, is also one of those political moments where the planets align, where you see all of this insider dealing and profiting while the little people are left behind. I think that this is one of those contributing factors behind people looking at Trump and thinking, you're kind of out of touch, aren't you, with the populist message? Remember when you were the voice of the little man? Was populism really about billions of dollars in grift and payoffs to your billionaire oligarch friends? And I think that this is one of those moments where people are seeing whether you want to do the Marie Antoinette let them eat cake analogy, or as John Ossoff has come up with, the Epstein class. Isn't that interesting, by the way, that is turning out to be one of the most potent political messages of the year, and apparently it polls very well. John Ossoff, the senator from Georgia, who is beginning to describe this whole culture of insider dealing and corruption as Donald Trump doing the bidding of the Epstein class. That's kind of an interesting twist on that story, isn't it?
It is. I just think John Ossoff needs to be cognizant of the fact that the Epstein class included a lot of very prominent Democrats.
Yeah,
some of whom
no way around
are
that.
Still very prominent Democrats, and not all of it has been revealed yet, by the way. So I do think Democrats need to be careful when they try to pin this. President Trump was a Democrat. That is partially why he was friends with Epstein, and the fact that they both loved women, as Trump said in his own words. But he said Epstein liked them on the younger side. So this is, the Epstein class. I was saying back in 2019 when I started reporting on Jeffrey Epstein alongside Virginia Giuffre and with Julie K. Brown, back when I did the Broken podcast, I had said, the list of the men that I had seen through the victims that I had spoken to, the many, many victims, I said, this could bring down our ruling class, our financial cap. It could. It could bring down, financial centers. Not everybody has been exposed in this. There's a reason why 2.5 million files have not come out. And, this is bigger than any corruption scandal I've ever seen in my lifetime, and I'm not sure that we're aware of one quite like this before because of the government cover-up.
But the truth is going to come out sometime, hopefully within our lifetime. But sometime...
I'm working on it, Charlie. Every single day I am working on it. I swear to you I am, because I'm trying to be able to tell people the things that I know. But, you can't just do it in the world that we live in right now with the lawfare and the way things are. You really have to, you want to be bulletproof. So, and that's why so many survivors, they're afraid to come out and say the names of the men that have abused them, because they're afraid of going through what happened to Virginia Giuffre that ultimately led to her death. I mean, look at what Alan Dershowitz did to her. He made her life a living hell, sued her for defamation. They're all afraid of that. And it's really, really intense. And it just, that's why when Sarah Kellen, who was one of Epstein's lieutenants, she went and testified on the Hill. She named them. She gave 3 names. Okay, the mayor of Miami Beach, a hairdresser, Frederick Fekkai, who is famous, by the way, and a man who's dead, a photographer, Patrick Demarchelier, who was big but is dead. And she chose only 3 names, and I know she knows many, many more than that. But she said that, I believe, because those were the people who weren't going to sue.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that. And of course, just a reminder for people that the moment that you are sued, you lose, because you have to start running up the bills and everything. Whereas, if Elon Musk wants to sue you, his legal bills are like pocket change. I mean, not even pocket change of pocket change, but he could, even if he's got a meritless lawsuit, can make your life absolutely miserable. Okay, so speaking of the legal world, let's switch gears. The Supreme Court has ended its session with major decisions, and it is very much a mixed bag. I wrote yesterday, I focused on their decision in the Slaughter case, where they essentially said that the president, not essentially, they said the president can fire any member of the quasi-independent agencies, any of these boards, including those that oversee civil service. They carved out an exception for the Federal Reserve. But this is, I think it was Justice Sotomayor who said this is the kind of power that not even kings had. And I thought this was a hell of a way to celebrate the 250th anniversary of our first No Kings Declaration back in 1776. But there are others who push back and say, okay, that I was excessively negative, and I'm willing to entertain that, because this court has set some limits, some guardrails on tariffs, on birthright citizenship. Do you have a sense? I mean, you want to weigh in on the balancing of whether this court is actually upholding constitutional norms? Because I'm sorry to go on here, but I guess part of it is just sort of the timing of it, is the choice that, given the corruption that we're talking about, given the anti-constitutional initiatives of this president, for the U.S. Supreme Court to choose this moment in history to give him vast new powers seems like an extraordinary thing. Where do you come down on where the court is vis-a-vis Trump?
It's an interesting question. I mean, yesterday, we're recording this on Wednesday, so the rulings came out on Tuesday. It was a mixed bag for both Democrats and Republicans. So you think about it, the big loss for Trump was losing birthright citizenship, right? He wanted to take that away, and the court said no. That was obviously a hard line for them, and that was a majority vote, 6-3, against doing so, against in keeping with birthright citizenship, referencing the 14th Amendment, right? They also, it was a win for Democrats, in which they said that you could vote, you could count mail-in ballots after 5 days. So that's another win, because obviously, as we know, President Trump is against mail-in ballot voting, which is bizarre to me, but sure. Okay. And then there were, what was the other one that was a win for Democrats? There were so many that came out yesterday.
Well, I mean, let's not forget the fact that they didn't they let the verdict stand for E. Jean Carroll, the woman that he sexually abused A judge said he raped her
Right.
and then defamed her. They left that in place. And so if you're Donald Trump,
And
I
they
mean,
let
you know,
Lisa Cook
that was a
stay
big
in the Federal Reserve
right.
job. They won't let
Right.
him remove Lisa Cook, and they are saying the Federal Reserve is too far. So they are showing some limits, this Supreme Court, but they are, like you said, they've given him pardon power. He cannot be prosecuted as president. It's pretty incredible, the power that the Supreme Court has given him. And now I think what's concerned me the most in this theme of corruption is that billionaires have more power than ever before to decide elections because they can coordinate with candidates directly now.
That was a huge decision for the Republicans. Right.
Yeah, although I think that Chinese firewall was really violated in 2024, and I think actually Ron DeSantis showed everyone with his Never Back Down super PAC, which was which at the time during the primaries had more money than any super PAC in history, the Never Back Down super PAC, and it just so happened that bus was everywhere that Ron DeSantis was. It was so coordinated that it was hard to see a difference between the campaign and Never Back Down. Then Trump gets $300 million from Elon Musk, the most ever donated by a single person to his MAGA campaign. And suddenly what we're seeing is billionaires have even more power than ever to elect officials, and now the Supreme Court has made it even easier. And, something I never really, I guess, quite appreciated was the fact that Democrats tend to raise more money as candidates in smaller donations, right? They get more smaller dollar donations, more grassroots funding. And so candidates get better ad rates. And I don't think most people really quite appreciate that, that candidates get better ad rates on TV. And if you are a super PAC, you have to pay, I think it's as much as 5 times more for ads. And so if super PACs can coordinate with candidates and Republicans just have
there are no limits anymore. Yeah.
They have more soft power, more soft money.
And that was a huge victory for the Republican National Committee. But let's in terms of what Donald Trump cared about the most, I think there's no question about it that this birthright citizenship case, which by the way, there was no chance that the court, I didn't think. I mean, the good news is that there was no chance the court was going to basically overturn all of these precedents involving birthright citizenship. I was a little bit shocked, actually not a little bit shocked. I was actually shocked by how close the vote was. This is one of those cases that should have been 9-0 or 8-1 or 7-2. In fact, it was 6-3. And really, it was 5-4 because Kavanaugh did not say there was a constitutional right for birthright citizenship. He based it on statutory law. So we're one vote away. So that was alarming, but it was a loss for Donald Trump. He cares about this. And it is interesting, the things he cares about the most. He is obsessed with finding ways to rig the vote, to suppress the vote. The SAVE Act, which is almost irrational, his obsession. The House of Representatives is in complete chaos as a result of this. He lost the case in the Supreme Court about mail-in voting, as you pointed out. But also this birthright citizenship, that he's now saying that he wants Congress to change the law. And once again, he's asking the impossible, isn't he? There's something about this moment, and you've been talking about this, and I'm sorry, this will sound like I'm going far afield, but like for example, looking at the reflecting pond, bear with me, the great state fair, and saying, ignore the evidence of your eyes. It was packed. There were thousands of people that the cameras are panning and nobody's there. It's like, okay, you're asking us to ignore reality. And now politically, he's telling Congress, you have to pass the SAVE Act. I won't do anything else. When everybody's saying that's not possible, it's not going to happen. He says, you need to change birthright citizenship. That's not possible. It's not going to happen. The amount of political capital the guy is spending on things that just are not going to happen is really kind of amazing, isn't it? I mean, we're kind of in this, are we all prisoners? This is a rhetorical question. All prisoners of Donald Trump's delusions now?
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. I mean, the fact that he refuses to sign a bill, the first bill in 3 decades that would lower the pricing of housing and construction. and it's an obvious win for Republicans. It's
Huge
a bipartisan bill, huge win, and it stops actually something that Donald Trump has long been talking about. One of the few points I think most people can agree with, that these massive corporations like Blackstone's shouldn't be able to buy up single-family homes. It prohibits that in the bill, and he won't even sign it because they won't pass the SAVE Act. I mean, that is his obsession. Now, it was passed by a veto-proof majority, so whether he signs it or not, it's
the housing bill.
It's going to pass. But you're not allowing your own party to take a victory lap before the midterm elections. And the other thing is, like, he's completely delusional about the things that people actually care about, things that make them stay up at night. They are not staying up at night worrying about who's voting and who's not voting. What they are staying up at night worrying about is affordability, and he calls it a hoax. So, he's lost the plot. I really think so. This is the problem.
I think so too.
He's in the bubble. They end up in this presidency bubble. Everybody around him is a yes man, and he's just completely lost the plot.
Okay, I hesitate to ask this because I have not written about this or posted about it at all. But we know that he's in a bubble. And Trump 2.0, the bubble is much more, contained. That there's nobody who's telling him that, maybe this would be a bad time to, be putting up more gold gilt and doing all this other stuff. Maybe you ought to actually pretend that you care about citizens. So it's a really tight bubble, right? But, from this book that you mentioned, that the Haberman, Jonathan Swan book, the bubble is even weirder than we perhaps thought. What do you make of these reports of this 34-year-old aide who has this incredible access to him, who writes him notes saying, "You are everything for me," that she's obsessed with him, and yet feeds him, apparently goes around with a printer where she feeds him all kinds of the weird shit that he likes to read, and carries batteries around. I mean, this feels like it's weird within weird. What do you make of that story? I'm willing to pass that one on because I don't know what to make of it, except
I know it is weird. Natalie Harp.
Yes,
she's this petite blonde. Although she could be tall for all I know, but it's very weird. It's kind of hilarious. I mean, she could be a character in a movie. The way that they describe her, it's just like it's almost fictional. Her adoration for him and the way she communicates, it is very weird. It's childlike. He must enjoy it. I mean, what older man doesn't enjoy the infatuation of a young woman? And that is
we're talking
how
Donald Trump
women.
Here. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that is sort of how he sees women. You see that in the combativeness that he has with journalists when he tells them to smile, comments on their weight, doesn't like, the way that they interact. Like, that is the type of relationship he prefers with women, one of servitude, one of intense gratitude, intense adoration. Adoration, printing off positive. Like, I actually remember writing about this back in 2017 when I was working for Politico as a White House correspondent, that one of my first stories was that President Trump's team was actually feeding him a media diet in the morning that would put him in a good mood. So, because he was so grumpy all the time. So they would print out pieces that were positive for him, and that was how they would manage his eruptions, because he was so difficult to manage. And she's essentially doing the same thing. I mean, this is something they've had to continue to do throughout his presidency. Otherwise, he becomes untenable. I mean, and it's just this is
and the fact that they feed him this, as you wonder, as you watch him, you think you're getting more and more bizarre. The narcissism is just out of control. I mean, all the filters are being destroyed, and what's going on here? And then you read this story about being followed around by this young woman who constantly is telling him how wonderful he is and feeding him something. There is that old story of the Roman emperors when they stage triumphs in Rome after they'd won a battle or won a war, and they would have this great procession. And I don't know whether the story is true because I saw it in a movie, that there would be a slave who would stand in the chariot with the conquering general or emperor, who would whisper in his ear just a reminder that you are mortal, that you are not God. It was a moment of like just saying to remind you to be humble. Donald Trump has exactly the opposite, right? He has somebody in his ear constantly telling you, you are the greatest, you are the king, you are the emperor, you are bigger even than Jesus. And wow, what could possibly go wrong? I think we're kind of seeing that, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. And I think also when you know that he was really influenced by that pastor who wrote the book, The Power of Positive Thinking. I mean, this woman is literally a human positive thinking machine printer.
Yeah.
I mean, she prints out positive thoughts for him
Yeah.
all day long. And then so he can read it, hear it, feel it, breathe it. She's an emotional support animal. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Okay, I just want to go back to the things that are obsessing MAGA and this decision on birthright citizenship, which I think is settled for now. Although, as I said, I think it's somewhat alarming that there were as many votes to say there's not a constitutional right for it. But I occasionally do a series on my Substack called the Broken Brains of MAGA, and the brokenest brain over the last 24 hours was the founder of The Federalist, Sean Davis. Are you familiar with Sean Davis at all? I don't know if you ever run across Sean Davis.
I haven't actually met him before. I mean, no.
I actually think I might have had lunch with him once. I mean, back in the I mean, to say this guy is broken, I mean, to give you an idea of how crazed MAGA is about these rulings. First of all, they're going after Amy Coney Barrett, that she has betrayed them because she actually upholds the Constitution. I mean, they're so angry at her treason here. But listen to what Sean Davis posted on X. He's treating this like it's the end of the world, that if you're born in the United States, you get to be a U.S. citizen. And so he goes through with this lengthy post laying out how the right should respond. And it goes from nullification to the dissolution of the union to court packing to, I am not kidding, this is number 3, deny entry to all pregnant foreigners, deny entry to all female foreigners. Number 5, he put this in writing, require sterilization of all foreign visitors prior to
sterilization? That is disgusting.
Well, it's batshit crazy and disgusting.
Well, I mean, the first few points were insane, but this is actually some draconian medieval idea. That's horrible. What is this guy? This man is disgusting.
Yeah, just imagine. But what would that do to American tourism?
Google searches. Just imagine his Google searches, Charlie.
Well, I didn't want it. And that's okay. So number 5 is requires sterilization of all foreign visitors prior to entry. I wonder if we would have applied that to the World Cup. Might have been problems there. Number 6, dissolution of the union. We're back to that. A nation which cannot even restrict who gets to be a citizen isn't a nation. And then basically says give up on amending the Constitution because whatever. So, I mean, there are these obsessions out there, and I think this is kind of an indication of what really motivates people. As you point out, I think the average American is like, hey, can I afford gas? Can I afford to send my kid to college? Can I do a lot of these things? Do we live in a decent country? And then you have, Trump's really extreme MAGA base is like, how can we hate migrants more than we do now? How can we find a way to stop the wrong people from voting? And it is, I don't know, maybe at one time this did fire up the base. It feels just completely disconnected from the reality of America on our 250th anniversary. What do you think? I mean, the craziness.
I actually think, knowing my father, and he is quite MAGA, this is a very animating issue for him. Hilariously also married a immigrant. I was an anchor baby for my mother when they were not married. But I mean, she did have a green card, but still, it's absurd. To me, there is so much, and he's he's a second or third generation Italian, but he's very animated about the immigration issue. And I actually think this is the one thing that can almost distract them from affordability because they link the two. They link migration with safety and affordability. So it's not, I do think that's an issue that will animate them, but it's so hypocritical. The origins of birthright citizenship, it's because this country, we're all foreigners. Going back to the Mayflower, we're foreigners. We are foreigners. And then you had the whole complication of slaves. I mean, they didn't have, there was questions about their birthright because they were brought here illegally, right? So it's absurd. And I think that they don't like to think of themselves as foreigners. But in Europe, I mean, having lived in a country for 200 years barely makes you an Italian or or a Spanish person. It's just a Spaniard. It is very different. It's the one thing that made the United States really distinctive from other countries. As you point out, you can move to France. My daughter lives in France, and you're never going to be completely French, right? No,
I mean, you're always going to. You can move to Germany, and you're never going to be completely German. You move to the United States, and at some point, we all acknowledge, or at least we used to, you can become an American because this is what we do. And by the way, there's something out there. And I talked about this on my live stream with Matt Lewis yesterday. I didn't have a chance to see it until afterwards. I would strongly recommend, if you can find it, it's a dialogue between Ronald Reagan and Megyn Kelly about immigration. It's a juxtaposition of Megyn Kelly saying, "You Haitians, go back to your effing country," and everything. And then it cuts to Ronald Reagan explaining why we are a country of immigrants and what. And it is brilliantly done. And it's just a kind of reminder how far we have come for people who believe that somehow that everything now is a straight line between Reaganism and Trumpism. Watch that. And it's actually kind of surprising, but also the eloquence with which Reagan refutes and pushes back against the raw bigotry represented by people like Sean Davis and by Megyn Kelly. It's definitely worth your time. So
I've heard from my own family, just because, I'm Polish, I'm first generation. My mom was born in Poland before the wall fell, and they immigrated through chain migration, much like Melania Trump's family did. They didn't have H-1B status or anything like that. They worked in very working class jobs. And the truth is that there were people in my extended family that weren't on proper visas or didn't have, the right, green cards, or they maybe didn't have green cards, et cetera. But the feeling at the time was that we had to welcome these people because they were coming from communist Poland, or they were coming from, Russian USSR rule. And that was the feeling when we let the Haitians in after the earthquake. We were letting people into a country that were suffering in another country to build new lives and to make ours better. And why? Because they're blonde and blue-eyed in Poland, that's different than being Haitian because they're black. That's what it comes down to. That is what it comes down to. The assimilation. Wow. Is that they want white. Trump has flat out said it. He's like, I will take South Africans, white South Africans. I will take Swedes from Scandinavian countries. Yeah. He's obsessed with Ukrainian women. He talks about how Ukrainian women are so beautiful, but he's angry about the war. It's all about image to him, and which is really just an extension of eugenics and racism, honestly. And in my mind,
it is. Well, no, and actually, I think that's objectively true, and that's what made the back and forth, last week about when the Supreme Court ruled that he had the power to eliminate the temporary protective status for Haitians. Yes, the courts should not be able to review that, except if there's a constitutional issue, if there's racial animus. The precedents are if racial animus was a factor, then it's constitutionally questionable. And Justice Alito basically says there's nothing about what Trump has said about the Haitians that is racist. And I think it was Elena Kagan who was just gobsmacked. He said, can you just read what he wrote? What he has said, that they all have AIDS, they are poisoning the blood, the lies about eating the dogs and the cats. It's not subtle at all when he says, why do we have these people from the shithole countries? Why can't we have more people from Norway and Sweden? I mean, what do people think he's talking about?
They want us to repopulate and then as part of it, they want women to repopulate the earth with white. Yes. They want white women to continue to repopulate the earth, and that's why they make them feel bad about not having children. So it keeps going. It's really actually classic fascism. That's like that is something that they've always wanted, right? They want white.
Isn't that the 12 words or something?
It's true. I mean, it's not even subtle. It's not even subtle.
No. It's not. And you mentioned it's classic fascism, and it's the kind of stuff that, quite frankly, I mean, I'm retaining the ability to be shocked about all of this because just feels like a few years ago you would not have heard this sort of thing outside of just the most extreme sort of white nationalist sites. Okay, so in the few minutes we have left, I want to talk about an amazing interview you had. And a flagrant act of journalism that you committed. I want to talk about your live stream interview with a Republican Congresswoman named Cammack. Am I pronouncing this right?
Yeah.
Who is a pro-life Republican who went through an extraordinary experience herself and talked to you about it, and then asked you not to actually publish it. So, can you just give the viewers just and people should go and listen to this, on your own. But give me just a short review of this remarkable interview. First of all, how did it come about? Why were you interviewing this particular Republican Congresswoman? What was the origin of that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, go to my YouTube channel. Yeah. It's the Tara Palmeri Show. You can watch on Spotify or Apple, but you can watch the interview. It's a long one, and it doesn't it happens towards the end of the interview, this last question that I ask her about this ectopic pregnancy, which essentially meant that the fetus didn't actually embed into the right place where it was supposed to in the uterus to create a life in a natural way that would survive, right? And she had to get a life-saving abortion. It was
because ectopic pregnancies can be life-threatening. I mean, this is...
Oh, yeah, you bleed out.
Yes.
It's like having a cyst that explodes. You bleed out. You would die from sepsis or...
So this is what was happening to her.
This is what was happening to her. And she reached out to my show, by the way, to ask to come on. Not to necessarily talk about this. She had seen that I had talked about Jill Biden and her book tour, and I had been critical of the Biden family. And I'm a journalist, and I don't play for either side. And when I see something that I don't, I cover both sides, the good, the bad, and the ugly for left and right. So their, I guess, PR team office thought that this was an opportunity to highlight her. She's been in Congress for 5 years, but she's still young and up and coming. She's my age. And the thing about her that I thought was interesting was that she is a young MAGA female fighting sexual harassment on Capitol Hill.
Right.
And that is a phenomenon I find very intriguing. Anna Paulina Luna, Nancy Mace, Marjorie Taylor Greene, demanding the Epstein files be released, going after their colleagues for sexual harassment on Capitol Hill, which is a huge problem, but also defending President Trump after he's been accused by over 30 women of sexual abuse, right? So there is obviously that hypocrisy, but I'm curious about her. I thought it would be interesting. She's not exactly a household name. But she did do an exclusive interview last year with the Wall Street Journal to talk about this experience where she had to get this life-saving abortion. And she is pro-life in Florida, where there is a 6-week heartbeat ban. So after 6 weeks, it has to be life-threatening to the mother to remove the fetus. And that's pretty much as restrictive as it gets in America. And it barely passed, by the way. The amendment, there was an amendment that went out to overturn this, this law that went back to a prior. I think when Roe versus Wade was overturned, it went back to the prior law in Florida. And then there was an amendment in November of 2025, and it lost by a vote, basically. So this current law is not very popular in the state. But
does it have an exception for the life of the mother?
It does. But this is the problem with these laws. Okay. It does. But here's the problem, Charlie, is that it's really... First of all, their penalties against the doctors are insane. I mean, doctors can lose their licenses. They pay a fine on top of that. And you have to prove that the mother's life was truly at risk. So you have to go through bureaucratic paperwork. You have to make a judgment call at the end of the day if the mother's life is truly at risk.
Right.
And they decided in her case, she said because of geofencing that showed ads that reinforced the penalty for, performing an abortion, that they could be penalized, right?
So she's in the hospital. So she's telling you, and she's in the hospital. She's pro-life. She has this ectopic pregnancy. She knows you have to have an abortion. And she's sitting there and she's bleeding out and actually checking to see how long will it take for me to die bleeding out. And the doctors and nurses are talking to the administrators and trying to figure out what they can do based on the law. I mean, this had to be kind of a wake-up moment for her. Like, this is what could possibly go wrong? This could possibly go wrong, right? I mean,
and she knows the law. How many women end up in the hospital and this happens to them and they don't know the law? She called the governor's office looking for a lawyer to argue her rights. And I mean, again, how many women would even know the number for the governor's office or think to do that? She's a lawmaker.
But the doctors were so scared. I mean, they know what an ectopic pregnancy is. They could see her. She's there. She's bleeding out. And they were so afraid. They were going through their bureaucratic process.
You're asking a doctor to essentially decide whether their job is more important and their livelihood is more important than a patient's life.
That should be an easy question, but I take your point. Right. It is in the real world. So she told you this story, and then afterwards, even though she had talked to the Wall Street Journal about it, she asked you not to run it.
Yes, she asked me not to run it. She said that she was worried about her family's safety because of activists on the left. And, the way that she interpreted this story was that activists on the left had misinterpreted, they were using misinterpretations of the law to scare healthcare workers, okay? And I countered her and said, well, what if that's the problem with the law, that it can be so easily misinterpreted? Don't you think that's a problem? Listen, Charlie, when I heard that story, you know what I thought to myself? I can never get pregnant in Florida. I can't get pregnant in Texas. I can't even travel to those states because God forbid I end up in a hospital and there is someone who is afraid that performing a pregnancy on me to save my life might mean that they have to go up against a hospital administrator. They might end up in court and they might not win, even if they know that they had to do it to save my life. And they choose instead to let me die rather than dealing with that sort of administrative hassle. Also, if you end up in the hospital with a heart attack, at what point does the doctor have to go through an administrative process to make sure that it's okay to save you? No, you are saved immediately. This is insanity. And I just, when I heard this story, I thought to myself, I was gripped. She cried on the show.
Yes.
I felt compassion for her. I also had I said, if I learned something, and I'm a 38-year-old woman who knows a lot about this topic, I'm in the weeds day to day. If I learned something, I hope that this story might save the lives of somebody else or the life of another woman. And I believe that journalism is about public service. And it was on the record. She was talking to you, talking to me exactly how I am talking to you right now on camera. There was no, is this off the record? Is this not on the record? Afterwards, she asked me not to run it. And in fact, her communications advisor then threatened me and said that all people from the Republican, not all people, but that they will make sure that every member of Congress knows how I deal with, I
think you live with that.
Well, honestly, I booked I had another member on 2 days later. I followed the rules of journalism.
Yeah. This was a flagrant act of journalism. This is a news story. This is the kind of thing that people need to hear about, to have the kind of debate in our society that we need to have. And the fact that this came from somebody who is pro-life, and part of it is something that conservatives really used to understand was the unintended consequences of certain policies or laws. And this should have been kind of one of those, oh my God, here we are. Now this is a sitting member of Congress, right, who was very, very privileged, very wired in, and yet was sitting there going, how long do I have before I will die from bleeding out from this because of this law? And so, you made obviously the right decision to do it, and people ought to really watch that. But what an extraordinary, really, and it is an extraordinary story that I think does deserve wider.
One thing I do want to point out is that Charlie, like 2 days later, she put out a statement saying that she had told me to hold that part of the interview, and that after they had apprehended a man who was at large coming for her family, then I could publish it. That's not what she said. She said, we can sit down at a later date and do another interview again about this. But she never said at one point, hold it. She said, just don't run it. And also, you can't I can't do deals like that. That's not what we do. And frankly, they do that frequently in legacy journalism for access, but that's not why I'm an independent journalist. Like, I left that behind for a reason. So
this is actually a very important point here, is that the access journalism at a certain point will mean that you will make concessions to the newsmakers and the sources. And this is one of the things that I think has poisoned the credibility of journalists and their ability to speak truth to power. So this is not a side issue. This is a fundamental issue. And you're making the point that this is one of the strengths of independent journalism, as opposed to the folks who say, we want you to stay as close to these people as possible, not make them mad so that you will get these stories. That's not what journalism is about, is it?
No, it's not. And I've seen it up close. And I will say that access has become a game in journalism, whether it's to book for the Sunday shows, get the big interview with the president, get the scoops first. And it's not real. It's not fair. And and you're right. It's why audiences distrust the legacy media right now. While they are great reporters and a lot of them are doing great work, you can't negotiate. You can't negotiate with.
No, you can't.
No, you can't.
That's always been the case, but especially now, you cannot have those kinds of negotiations. Tara Palmeri, thank you so much for your time and your insight. You can find Tara's work here on Substack, The Red Letter, and of course on YouTube as well. So thank you very much.
That was another episode of the Tara Palmeri Show. Thank you so much for joining in. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday weekend. I can't do this without you. You can continue to support the show by clicking that subscribe button, follow, sharing, commenting, telling all your friends about it. You can go to the QR code where you can sign up for the Red Letter, and by becoming a paid subscriber, you can get my exclusive reporting straight to your inbox. You can also support this show by becoming a member of this YouTube channel. It would mean the world to me. This is how we do this independently without shadowy funders, and how I can make the type of tough editorial decisions that aren't about access and advertising, but about me speaking directly to you and asking the questions that you want answered. I want to thank my producer and editor on this one, James Sussin. I also want to thank Abby Baker. I want to thank Adam Stewart, who'll be back next week, but we gave him a week off and we're thankful for that because we don't want him to burn out. He does the amazing graphics and thumbnails. Nicole Staple and Dan Rosen, my managers. See you again soon, and I hope you're all well.